Have you ever felt so tired that you no longer wanted to explain anything? You didn't want to tell anyone why you became quiet, why you walked away, or why you changed. There are days like that, when words lose their meaning, when everything inside you feels overloaded, and the only thing you have strength left to do is let go. But not with screams or tears, with silence. I once held on to too many things, too many people, too many emotions I thought I needed. I was afraid that if I let go, I would feel empty. I was afraid of losing, afraid of having no one to hold on to. But one day, I realized the very things I tried to keep were draining me. Every old memory, every familiar habit, every relationship I no longer trusted was like a small stone in my backpack. Light at first, but the farther I went, the heavier it became. I began to understand that not everyone can walk with us forever. Not everything that once had meaning is meant to last. Some people, some habits, some thoughts are sent only to teach us a lesson. And when that lesson ends, we must learn to put them down. No resentment, no explanation, just the awareness that holding on means you cannot grow. I remember one cold afternoon, I looked at myself in the mirror and realized that the face staring back was no longer me. I smiled the way I thought others wanted to see. I spoke softly enough not to offend anyone. I dressed the way they said was appropriate. And I realized I was living like an actor in a movie without a real script. I had become the person the world needed, not the person I truly was. That realization scared me. It scared me because I didn't know who I was anymore. I asked myself, if I stopped, if I no longer played any role in other people's eyes, would I still exist? But that fear was also the first sign of awakening. Because only when you start fearing the loss of your role do you realize you've been trapped in it for too long. There is a subtle kind of imprisonment when you build a cage for yourself out of others' expectations, out of the need to be accepted, loved, and seen. I lived in that cage. I locked myself inside with fake smiles, forced agreements, and silences when I should have spoken. I built my own prison and labeled it safety. But in the quiet of a long night, I understood that safety is not being loved by others. Safety is being able to look in the mirror and recognize the person you see, your real self. Not a copy, not a performance, but the real you, with all your imperfections, with your shadows, with the parts you still struggle to forgive. I started doing one small thing. I stopped explaining. When someone asked why I seemed different, I just smiled. When someone wanted to know what happened, I stayed silent. I let change happen quietly. And I realized that letting go in silence is a strange kind of strength. No drums, no announcements, just walking away from what no longer belongs to you calmly, firmly. In silence, I learned to listen to myself. I heard a small but steady voice within saying, "Come home. Come back to your true self, unpainted, unguarded, not needing to be understood, just real." But the path back is not easy. Because you must release not only your old self, but also the image others believed was you. They will be confused. They will ask. They will judge. But that is no longer your concern. Your only task is to be honest with yourself. I began to take off the layers of disguise. Each time I let go of one, I felt a little lighter, even if more vulnerable. I learned to live without asking for permission. I learned to say no without guilt. I learned to breathe slowly and deeply, realizing that I am still here without needing anyone's approval. Someone once asked me, "How do you know when it's time to let go?" I don't have a perfect answer. I only know that when something starts to make you feel small, drained, or fake just to survive, that's when you must go. No need for goodbyes. No need for anyone to understand. Just know that holding on will slowly dim your inner light. Letting go is not failure. It is the highest form of self-love. Loving yourself enough to stop living wrong. Loving yourself enough to walk away from what hurts, even if it once made you happy. There's a quote I always remember. The happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts. And maybe to change your life, you don't need to start with the world outside, but with cleaning the outdated thoughts within. That morning, when sunlight touched the window, I sat quietly for a long time. No thinking, no effort. Just listening to the sound of my heartbeat. And I knew I was ready. Ready for the journey of letting go, the quiet cleansing of the soul, where I would slowly release each burden, each role, each delay, and rediscover my true strength. Because sometimes the bravest act in life is simply to walk away in silence. When I first began learning how to let go, the hardest thing I faced wasn't other people. It was my own habit of delay. There's a quiet kind of fear. It doesn't scream or threaten. It only whispers, "Not yet." And I believed it too many times. I called it tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll start over. Tomorrow I'll write. Tomorrow I'll leave this place. Tomorrow I'll speak my truth. But tomorrow never came. It was only a shadow, a vague promise that made me feel safe, while I was slowly dying in silence. There were mornings I woke up feeling empty, not because life was too hard, but because I had let too many days pass without meaning. I wasn't just delaying tasks. I was putting life on hold. I was afraid to begin, because beginning meant facing the outcome. I feared failure, so I stood still. But standing still was the real failure. Then I remembered a quote I once heard. Tomorrow is not guaranteed. There is no promise that we'll have another chance to begin. Life doesn't wait for us to be ready. It only asks one thing. Are you brave enough right now? So I started with the smallest steps. Waking up 10 minutes earlier, cleaning a corner of my home, writing a few messy lines, calling someone I owed an apology. Every small action, no matter how ordinary, helped me feel a little more alive. Like laying down tiny bricks to rebuild my shattered self-respect. As I acted, the fear didn't disappear, but it stepped back. And something strange began to happen. The more I moved, the more I believed in myself. Not because I always got it right, but because I stopped abandoning myself in silence. Each morning, I looked in the mirror and asked, what will I do today to make myself proud? Sometimes the answer was simple: stop running. Just stop running. Then I realized, behind every delay, something else was hiding the past. It no longer existed, yet it controlled me with whispered memories, with guilt, with unhealed wounds. I used to think I just needed to forget, but memories don't disappear. They wait to be accepted. There were nights I dreamed of old places, a small room, a face I once loved, words I never got to say. I woke up feeling trapped in my own life, like time wasn't moving forward, but spinning in circles around the same old pain. That was when I understood some chains can't be seen, but they grip the soul tighter than anything else, and we will never truly move forward if we don't dare to face what's behind us. I remembered something Marcus Aurelius once wrote: the obstacle to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. I read that line over and over until I understood the very wounds that once brought me to my knees are the path to my strength. So I began to face each piece of the past. No more running, no more denial. I sat in stillness and rewrote my own story with truth. No more what if, no more if only. Just what happened and what I choose to do with it now. I learned to forgive, not to forget, but to stop dragging pain along like it was part of my identity. I no longer wanted to be the one who was hurt. I wanted to be the one who learned. And forgiveness, strangely enough, didn't start by thinking of others. It began when I told myself, you did your best. Every time I wrote down something I regretted, my heart felt a little lighter. I began to understand that the past only lives on if we keep feeding it. But if we look at it with gratitude, it becomes a lesson. I once looked back on my youth, reckless, naive, too trusting. I used to hate that version of me. But when I thought about it, that young fool had brought me here. Without those mistakes, I wouldn't know patience. I wouldn't know the value of peace. And for the first time in years, I smiled. Forgiveness isn't just about ending pain. It's about unlocking the door for yourself. When the door to the past finally closes, you'll hear a soft sound like a breath. That is the sound of freedom. I didn't need anyone to witness that process. I didn't need to explain it. I didn't need praise for surviving. I simply let it move through me, like wind passing through an empty field, leaving no trace, but carrying a new scent. And when my heart grew still enough, I realized something even more binding than the past, the quiet dependency on others to feel worthy. I used to think, if someone loves me enough, I'll feel enough. If someone understands me, I'll be at peace. But love came and went, and each time I broke. Not because I lost them, but because I realized I had no foundation inside. I had been breathing through someone else's lungs. Maybe that's the softest form of slavery, when we hand over the key to our happiness into someone else's hands. So I started learning to return not to anyone else, but to myself. I learned how to sit alone without feeling lonely. I asked myself, if no one else is here, will I still be okay? And when that answer slowly became yes, I knew I was becoming truly free. Not the loud kind of freedom, but the quiet strength of someone who knows, no matter who comes or goes, I remain whole. That evening, I looked up at the sky and saw the stars tiny, but persistent. I thought, maybe love is like that light. It doesn't need to possess anyone. It only needs to shine. And to love truly, we must first become someone who no longer needs saving. I took a deep breath. In the silence of that moment, something spread through me. Lightness, clarity. Like for the first time in years, I was standing on my own 2 feet. But just when we find freedom, a new challenge appears, not from the past, not from others, but from the deepest part of the mind. The fear of what hasn't yet happened. A more subtle darkness called imagination, fear of the future, arrives quietly. It doesn't knock or storm in. It seeps into the smallest moments, when I wait for a message that never comes, when work stays silent for too long, or when someone's glance moves past me without stopping. It whispers, something bad is going to happen. And I believe it. I believe in stories that have never been real, and in doing so, I lose the present. I lived like that for many years, afraid to be wrong, afraid to lose, afraid to be seen, afraid to be forgotten. I wasn't tired because of what had happened. I was exhausted from fighting 100 imagined versions of what might. Every day, I locked myself inside a prison of thoughts, battling monsters that only lived in my mind. One morning, I realized I had lost the ability to see the beauty of now. I could no longer smell the coffee, hear the birds, or remember the last time I laughed with my whole heart. I had become someone drifting through the days without truly living. Then, in a very small moment, as sunlight filtered through the curtains, I saw dust floating in the air, sparkling like tiny fragments of time. And I understood this is life, not in plans, not in fears, but in this very breath. I remembered an old teaching. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. Pain doesn't come from what happens, but from how we see it. Maybe I didn't need to change my life. Maybe I just needed to change how I looked at it. I began practicing watching my thoughts, like someone standing at a window watching the rain. I saw thoughts pass about work, about people from the past, about formless fears, but I didn't chase them anymore. I let them pass, and after a while, the rain stopped. For the first time, I understood what peace feels like. When the mind grows quiet, I can feel the space inside a place with no predictions, no anxiety, only presence. And in that space, I hear my true voice. That voice gently says, forgive, not others, but the parts of me that once made me afraid. Forgive the child within the one who worried too much, who tried to control everything just to feel safe. But along the way, I discovered another burden heavier than fear, resentment. The wounds still lived inside, quietly waiting, sometimes rising up and squeezing my chest. I used to think I needed justice to be at peace. I needed an apology. But after waiting endlessly and receiving nothing, I realized some doors only open when we stop knocking. Resentment, I came to see, is poison we drink hoping someone else will suffer. I drank it for years, not knowing it was drying out my soul. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means laying down the burden we've carried on our back for too long. One afternoon, I sat by a lake. The wind blew softly. The surface rippled gently. I whispered, I let go. Not of someone else, but of the version of me that suffered, that raged, that needed to prove she was right. I let her go. And the tears came, but they weren't bitter. They were clear, light, like water washing dust off the soul. As my heart grew lighter, I saw something strange. Peace never comes from the outside. It arrives the moment we stop demanding the world change for us. And in that stillness, I felt another kind of strength, the power of gratitude. Grateful for the pain that made me deeper. Grateful for those who left and forced me to stand on my own. I no longer want to live in reaction to pain. I want to live as proof that I can love, even after being hurt. That I can still be gentle, even when the world is not gentle with me. If you're hearing this, maybe you too carry wounds like that, the unspoken things, the people who never came back, the long nights wondering why. I want you to know, you're not alone. Each of us is fighting a quiet battle, and sometimes Just admitting that we're tired is the first step to healing. If these words touched you even a little, if something inside you stirred, pause for a few seconds. Take a deep breath and let me know you're still here. Write a few words, leave a small trace, a message, just to say, I'm still on the journey. Not for me, but for yourself. Because when we dare to share, even just a little, we help rekindle the flame of connection among souls searching for peace. I don't believe in hollow slogans about happiness. I only believe in real moments, the ones where we face ourselves without pretending. Because it is in those moments of weakness that strength begins to grow. I once thought finding peace meant winning, but now I know peace doesn't come from victory or defeat. It comes from surrender. Surrendering the stubborn ego, letting go of the need to be seen, releasing the craving to always be right. And when I did, a wide space opened up inside, where even breathing felt lighter. I looked up. The sun had set. The last light of the day spread a soft golden orange across the lake. I smiled, not because anything had changed, but because for the first time I felt enough. But peace is not the final stop. It is only a resting place to prepare for another test, one not from the past or fear, but from our most tender place, the need to be loved. Not love itself, but the subtle dependence we often mistake for love. And from the moment I saw that truth clearly, the real journey of love began. Love is the strangest thing I've ever known. It can make us feel alive, and yet it can also make us lose ourselves. Some people enter our lives like fire warm, radiant, making us believe we are seen, understood. But when they leave, we realize that fire not only warmed us, it also burned the most fragile parts of who we are. I once believed that to be happy, I needed someone to hold my hand through the storm. I thought if I were loved enough, cared for enough, I would feel less empty. But then one day, when the person I loved turned away, I felt like I had fallen into a bottomless void. Not because they left, but because I realized I didn't know how to stand on my own. One evening, I sat alone in a small room, phone off, lights off, just the faint glow from the street outside spilling in. I saw my shadow on the wall, small, quiet, like a child left behind. In that moment, I understood. I had used love as a crutch to walk through life. I didn't love to give. I loved because I was afraid to fall. I remembered someone once said, "No one is coming to complete you. If there is an emptiness inside us, no one can fill it. They can only reflect the parts of us we haven't dared to face." So I began learning how to be alone. At first, the silence was terrifying. It exposed every noise in my mind, the worries, the questions, the untouched spaces. I missed the texts that no longer came. I missed the warmth of a once familiar hand. I missed the comfort of having someone to tell about my day. But then, in those quiet moments, I began to hear something small, the sound of my breath, the steady beat of my heart, even when no one was around. And I realized life was still happening. It didn't need to be witnessed or love to be real. I was still here. I was still breathing. I was still me. That feeling didn't arrive all at once. It came in small pieces, like a seed sprouting after the rain. There were still nights I missed, still times I wanted to go back. But each time, I asked myself, if I return, will I still be myself? Or will I again become someone who lives through the eyes of others, who trades inner peace for a hint of warmth? I started loving myself not with grand gestures, but in small, honest ways, eating when hungry, sleeping when tired, not trying to prove anything, holding myself when loneliness crept in. I realized when we know how to soothe ourselves, the world no longer has the power to break us. I began to love quiet afternoon walks alone. I loved the way coffee cooled while I read a book. I loved hearing the wind tap against the window. The feeling of not needing anyone didn't make me cold. It made me stronger than ever. No one is coming to save us. But when we save ourselves, we learn to love without dependency. And that is real love. Real love doesn't demand. It doesn't come from fear or emptiness. It is born when two people are whole, not to complete each other, but to share their fullness. In that kind of love, no one is a crutch. They are simply two paths walking side by side. True connection is born between two free people, not between two broken ones using each other as anesthesia. That truth haunted me for a long time. Because I had once used love like a drug, not realizing I was slowly going numb. When I let go of the need to be needed, love became clearer. It was no longer about possession. It became gratitude. I became grateful for everyone who had come and gone, even those who hurt me, because through them, I learned the most precious lesson. My worth does not live in someone else's eyes. I began to understand more deeply the words of Epictetus. Choose not to be harmed, and you won't be. Sometimes, the wound is not in what others do, but in how we allow it to affect us. When we protect our inner peace, no one can take it from us. Free love is when we can say, I love you without losing ourselves. When we can walk away if needed, and still carry tenderness in our hearts. When we don't use someone to fill our emptiness, but to share the light we found within. And then, I discovered another truth, that sometimes, what hurts most isn't losing someone. It's losing the image we had of them. We think we love them, but really, we love the feeling of being needed, being seen, being chosen. When they leave, that illusion fades, and we're left to face the emptiness we never wanted to admit. I began focusing on becoming full. I wrote down things I was grateful for each day. I cooked for myself as if caring for someone I loved. I whispered goodnight to myself before bed. It might sound small, but it healed me. I began to feel my own presence as a loyal companion I could trust. One afternoon, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in a cafe window. No makeup, not trying to appear okay. Just me as I was. But in my eyes, I saw something new: peace. Not fleeting happiness, but a quiet steadiness I had never known before. When we stop searching for happiness in others, we begin to find it in our own breath. And miraculously, when we stop chasing it, it comes not loud or flashy, but like a gentle breeze across the heart. I know the journey of self-love never ends, but at least now, I'm no longer looking for someone to save me. I've become the one who can hold my own hand through the long nights. And when we can stand strong alone, the world begins to shift. We no longer fear silence. We stop worrying about what's next. But there's still one quiet enemy that lingers, something we think is harmless, yet it slowly eats away at our spirit. It's not love, not fear, but the habit of imagining things that haven't even happened. There is a kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from work or sorrow, but from the stories we create in our own minds. I used to live like that, waking up in peace, only for my thoughts to rush ahead within minutes, crafting dozens of future scenarios. What if something bad happens? What if someone leaves? What if everything falls apart? And just like that, before the day even began, I was already drained. Fear is clever. It doesn't need a reason, only a quiet space in the mind. The moment we're still, it slips in, bringing images, possibilities, all the what-ifs that make us feel like we're being careful. But really, we're just living in an imaginary world, suffering from things that haven't even happened. There were nights I lay staring at the ceiling, heart racing, even though nothing was wrong. My mind was just scripting tragedies: losing my job, losing people, losing everything. I tried to push it away, but the more I resisted, the stronger it grew. Until one day, I realized I didn't need to fight it. I just needed to see it. I started practicing something simple. When fear showed up, I whispered, I see you. I didn't hide. I didn't believe it. I let it speak. Let it show me all its terrifying visions. And when it was done, it grew quiet, like a child that only needed to be heard, not silenced. We talk a lot about freedom, but few realize the greatest freedom is not being ruled by our own minds. Most of our pain doesn't come from the present, but from living in imagined futures. It's not the event that hurts us, but how we think about it. I remember the words of Marcus Aurelius. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. When I read that again, I saw clearly I had turned tiny moments into tragedies, simply because I didn't know how to be still in the present. So I started watching myself. Each time worry rose up, I asked, is this happening right now? If the answer was no, I took a deep breath and returned. Returned to the smell of coffee, the sound of wind outside the window, the feeling of my feet on the ground. Small things, but real enough that fear couldn't exist alongside them. I realized that 90% of what I feared never happened, and the other 10%, when it did, I survived. So what had I been exhausting myself over all these years? Fear is just the mind trying to gain control. It tricks us into thinking that if we worry enough, we'll be safe. But worry doesn't protect the future, it only steals the present. We suffer twice, once in our imagination, once in reality. Stop suffering twice. That line echoed in my head for days. I tried a new habit. Each morning, before reaching for my phone, I sat still for 5 minutes, not meditating in any serious way, just sitting and letting my breath flow naturally. At first, my mind was like a crowded market, 1,000 thoughts pushing through. But as I stopped resisting them, they began to settle. In that quiet, I heard something clearly. Life is only happening here and now. I brought that awareness into small things. When I ate, I just ate. When I walked, I felt each step. When I listened to music, I let it move through me. Slowly, life felt deeper, not because it changed, but because I finally stayed present. One day, walking in the rain, I suddenly laughed. For years, I'd been chasing peace, when it was always right here in the sound of rain, in my breath. In the moment I stopped running, I realized what wears us out isn't the world, it's a restless mind. When I stopped trying to plan and fix everything, I felt lighter. Life was no longer a puzzle to solve, but a song to listen to. And from that stillness, I understood something new. Fear is just the other side of faith. If we can believe in the worst, we can also believe in the best. It's only a matter of which direction we choose. I began to believe in my own resilience. Not that everything would be perfect, but that no matter what happens, I will face it. I will live through it. That belief didn't rely on outcomes, but on my own presence. When we know we're strong enough to endure, we no longer need to control everything. And in letting go of control, freedom begins. I remember one evening my phone buzzed a message from someone from the past. Just a few words, nothing important. Yet my heart skipped. Before, I would have spiraled. What do they want? Will they come back? What should I say? But this time, I simply looked at the message, set the phone down, and returned to my breath. No judgment, no reaction. I let it pass, like a cloud across the sky, and the miracle was nothing collapsed. There was no tragedy. It was just a message, just life, unfolding as it always does. I smiled, realizing I had stepped through an invisible door, the one between living and fearing. On the other side was the present, simple, calm, complete. From that moment, I knew peace is not the absence of fear. It is the ability to stay, even when fear appears. Life makes no promises. It doesn't have to. Each day, it asks only one thing. Are you here? And when we are truly present, everything else becomes light as the wind. I slowed down, letting my breath fall into rhythm with my heartbeat. I looked around, nothing had changed, yet everything felt different. Maybe, just maybe, I had learned how to live without needing to know what's next. And in that relief, I understood. We are only truly free when we can forgive what's behind us and forgive ourselves. But forgiveness is not easy. It is a long journey, one where we must face wounds that still bleed. And I knew it was time to go deeper into the places where memory still echoes, where resentment still lingers, waiting to be released. Forgiveness. Just two simple words, yet perhaps one of the hardest lessons I've ever had to learn. I used to think forgiveness was something noble, reserved for kind-hearted people, and I didn't see myself as one of them. I wanted justice. I wanted answers. I wanted someone to be held responsible for the wounds I had carried for years. But life didn't answer the way I wanted. It stayed silent and forced me to learn how to heal on my own. Some people hurt us, not because they are cruel, but because they, too, are carrying wounds they haven't healed. But understanding that doesn't erase the pain. I still remembered the old words, the cold stares, the long silences. They clung to me like shards of glass, cutting deeper every time I touched those memories. Then one day, when I no longer had the energy to be angry, all I felt was emptiness. The anger couldn't hold me anymore. It only hardened my heart. I began to ask myself, if I don't let this go, how long will I carry it? That question made me fall silent. I realized sometimes forgiveness isn't for them. It's so I can finally breathe again. Resentment is poison. You drink yourself hoping it will harm others. I had been drinking that poison for far too long, without knowing. I thought holding on to my anger was a way to protect myself, but in truth, it was slowly killing me. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean agreeing with what happened. Forgiveness is simply ending the replay of pain in your mind. It's choosing to stop telling the same story, to stop reminding yourself that you are a victim. One afternoon, I went to a park, sat by the lake with a piece of paper and a pen. I wrote down the names of the people who had hurt me. Each name made my chest tighten. I wrote things I had never said out loud. Words like, "I'm angry with you. I wish you understood how much it hurt. I loved you once. I forgive you." I wrote until the tears smudged the ink. Then I folded the paper, didn't burn it, didn't throw it away. I simply set it down on the water. It floated, slowly, then began to dissolve, as if my anger too was being carried off by the wind. In that moment, I didn't feel immediate relief, just a strange feeling, like shedding a heavy coat my body hadn't yet adjusted to the weightlessness. But that night, when I got home, I noticed my heartbeat was slower. I slept. No more old dreams, no more haunted faces. Forgiveness, I realized, is the bravest act a person can choose. Because it doesn't reach outward, it reaches inward. It is the courage to touch our deepest wounds and say, "I still choose to love this life, even though it has hurt me." Seneca once wrote, "Braver is the one who conquers his anger than the one who conquers his enemies." I reread that on a winter morning, sunlight gently spilling through the window, and it hit me: true strength isn't making others bow to us. It's holding on to our peace, even when no one says sorry. I started to look at old memories through a different lens. Instead of asking why, I asked, what did this teach me? And I was surprised. The most painful things had taught me the most. Being betrayed taught me to trust my instincts. Being abandoned taught me how to stand alone. Being met with silence taught me to listen to the voice within. I once thought forgiveness was the end. But no, it was the beginning. When we forgive, we don't close a door. We open a new one, a door where no one else holds power over our thoughts anymore. I no longer wanted to live trying to return the pain. I just wanted to live in a way that my heart could finally feel light again. There was a time I crossed paths with someone who had deeply hurt me. They smiled, made small talk, as if nothing had ever happened. I stayed silent, listened, and realized I felt nothing. No anger, no pain, no need to explain. I simply wished them peace, not because I'm a good person, but because I didn't want to carry them in my heart for one more second. And in that very moment, I knew I was free. When we are no longer driven by anger, we begin to see everything more clearly. The sky seems brighter. Laughter feels more real. Even sadness softens. Forgiveness doesn't erase the pain, it simply gives us back the right to live fully. That evening, I returned home, opened my window. The wind carried the scent of night flowers. I breathed deeply and felt a wide open space in my chest. A place once full of bitterness, now filled with stillness. Not joy, but a deep quiet. The kind of peace no one can give us, and no one can take away. Only when we stop carrying anger can we make room for true happiness. And I suddenly understood something I had forgotten for years. Happiness is not a destination. It isn't something we reach at the end of suffering. It lives right here, in the moments we let our shoulders drop, forgive ourselves, and allow life to be simple again. Maybe we were taught wrong about happiness. We were told we needed to achieve something, go somewhere, be with someone. But happiness, it turns out, isn't about where we're going. It's about how we walk. When I look back on my journey, I see that the moments that gave me peace weren't the big wins, but the small moments when I was brave enough to let go. Let go of anger. Let go of blame. Let go of expectations. And when the heart is empty, happiness has space to enter. That night, I wrote in my journal, I don't want happiness someday. I want peace now. And maybe, for the first time, I truly understood what happiness means. Because happiness doesn't need to be found. It only needs to be received. And only when we stop chasing illusions of the future do we see happiness was always here, in this breath, all along. When I began to understand that happiness isn't a destination but a state of being, life suddenly felt different. I no longer woke up asking, what must I do today to be happy? I simply asked, how can I live more fully today? That question was small, but it made me pause, take a deep breath, and realize that happiness is always within reach, not by chasing it, but by slowing down. We've been taught that happiness is something to be achieved. A house, a job, a partner, a title. But the more we try to hold on to it, the more it slips away. Like water in the palm of your hand, the tighter you grip, the faster it runs out. I used to chase the thought, when I have that, I'll be okay. But when I finally got it, the joy only stayed for a few days, then faded like smoke. I realized our minds always want more. They convince us that a better version of life is just ahead, somewhere in the future. But that's a trap. If we never stop to feel the moment, no matter how much we achieve, we stay empty because we were never really present. One morning, I sat by the window watching sunlight filter through the leaves. I sipped my coffee, no music, no phone, just me and the sound of the wind. A deep peace spread through my chest. I didn't need anyone there, didn't need anything new. It was just me in the present. And I understood this is happiness. Not fireworks, just a soft, simple lightness that needs no explanation. Happiness isn't a reward for being perfect. It's a gift for those brave enough to accept that life doesn't need to be perfect. I remembered something a teacher once said. Happiness doesn't come from having more, but from needing less. The more we let go, the more we gain. Not more things or recognition, but more space to truly live. I started decluttering my life. Not just my home, but everything I didn't need. Empty conversations, relationships kept out of politeness, explanations I no longer felt like giving. I learned to be quiet instead of defensive, to step back instead of argue. And strangely, once I stopped needing to prove anything, my mind became quiet too. We often think silence is weakness, but I realized silence can be the peak of strength. Because to stay quiet without feeling offended, we must truly understand our own worth. Someone once asked me, "Why are you so quiet these days?" I just smiled and said, "Because there's nothing left that needs defending with words." I no longer felt the urge to explain why I've changed, why I chose this path, why I stay or leave. I just wanted to live at my own pace and let life speak for itself. Epictetus once said, "We are not responsible for what others think, only for our actions." And I understood when we live in alignment with our values, we don't need permission or approval. I used to spend so much energy trying to be understood. I apologized just to ease others. But now I know peace doesn't come from being accepted by others. It comes from no longer needing to be. When we no longer seek the world's approval, everything gets lighter. I also realized that not all things that harm us are obvious. Some are subtle, staying up too late, careless eating, skipping movement, scrolling endlessly. These small habits slowly wore me down. I began caring for my body, not to change how it looked, but to feel like I was living right. I went to bed early, breathed deeper, ate more slowly. Every healthy choice felt like telling myself, I deserve to feel well. I deserve love. There can be no clear mind in a tired body, no peaceful heart when we constantly wear ourselves down. I saw that self-love isn't indulgence. It's discipline. Discipline to protect our energy and clarity. Each morning, I opened the window, took a deep breath, and thanked life for another day. It sounds simple, but that gratitude made me strong. It quieted comparison, envy, the need to prove. I just wanted to live kindly, fully, and enough. As my life changed, I noticed something else. Judgment. A tiny habit that had crept in unnoticed. I saw someone fail and thought they should have done better. I heard someone choose differently and silently disapproved. But judgment, I realized, says nothing about them, only about the parts of me still unhealed. Every time I pointed a finger outward, I forgot that 3 fingers pointed back. I judged to avoid looking at my own tender places. So I began practicing the opposite, observing without judgment. When someone got it wrong, I asked, haven't I done that too? When someone complained, I wondered, am I complaining inside, in my own way? And strangely, the more I stopped criticizing, the softer my heart became. Gentleness doesn't make us weak, it makes us real. And when we become real, life becomes gentler too. Epictetus said, do not concern yourself with what others do. Concern yourself with what you should do. I carry that as a quiet reminder. Come back. Observe yourself. Stop trying to fix the world. Because the greatest journey in life isn't changing others. It's learning to face yourself without running. Tonight, as I write these words, I feel a rare stillness. I no longer want to compete, no longer need to be faster than anyone, no longer have anything to prove. I just want to keep going slowly, but truly. I don't know what tomorrow holds. I don't need to. I just know that if I can still breathe, listen, love, and live with gratitude, that's enough. Because in the end, what we truly need isn't noise, approval, or perfection, but the willingness to begin. No one asks us to be flawless. No one demands that we be strong every day. We only need to be honest enough to live as we are. And sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is to sit still in a noisy world and smile in the silence. Because in that moment, we touch something many are still searching for: peace. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. If this message touched your heart, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you'll never miss the next journey we take together. Your support means the world to me.